Right. Hello, folks. Good morning. It's Thursday. For some reason, I thought it was Friday. I was very confused this morning. How are you doing, Mike? Are you confused this morning, or are you okay?
Hanging in there, a little confused. Maybe a different emotion than a confused, but
Yeah.
we'll just
Yeah.
leave it at that.
Yep. So, yeah, it's funny because I streamed yesterday, and it was a good stream. And for some reason, I thought today was Friday, yet we were streaming, which anyone who knows us knows that that's not possible, because usually Friday mornings I facilitate an ensemble, and so those two are incompatible. But that's what happens when you don't have enough coffee, I guess. So, hello, Jiva the Coder and Stupendous Follow. Hello again.
Yeah, welcome back.
So last time we had somewhere in there we were struggling with something that wasn't working that we felt should have worked, and it turned out we were mostly right. So I did some work after and fixed that. So at some point you will want to do a git pull or an update in your IDE.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So let me go ahead and add the code to the stage. There it is.
Oops, got to get rid of my
Infinite window.
I need infinite warning. Let's see. Let me close this. I'm just gonna get my setup a little bit better. There we go.
So it's really
sorry.
interesting, because there is the thing we were hung up in was some time leaf stuff, and this is where you get into areas of different input types. So we're basically trying to figure out, why is our form not repopulating, and different input types act differently, and so when you do a pull, if you do I think it's a Control T or an Alt T or something, if you just do a git update from the menu.
Control T.
Yeah, Control T. Again, it's like, does Control T, does Alt, because on the Mac it's Alt T, and so it's like, does it map to Control or Alt? It goes both ways. So yeah, go ahead and merge the incoming changes. Hey there, Jonas. Welcome.
Might as well rerun all the tests.
Yes.
I can't remember if we left ourselves a breaking test breadcrumb or
I don't remember either.
or a
It
comment.
was only 2 days ago.
Yeah. Well, that's the disadvantage of disjointed programming and not
Yes. Yeah.
working on something regularly.
Yeah.
Looks like all the tests pass. So then we probably should test the UI change. Actually, we should probably bring it up, huh?
Yeah, let's bring it up, and while you do that, I'll give my opinion on Stupendous Follows. Keeps wanting to say fellow, and it's follow. Both are great. Both Stupendous Follow and fellow, unless you're not a fellow. So what do we think about documentation of business rules? Should they be documented in something like Confluence, or should tests be enough? I feel very strongly that specific concrete rules should be expressed in tests, because they're always going to be up to date. They're always going to be correct. They're always going to be indicating what the code actually does. And they can often, and we've discussed this before on stream, the tests should be readable enough, especially at that layer of the code, right? We're talking at the business domain layer of the code. The test should be readable enough that the business folks, you could look at it, maybe not on their own, but certainly be walked through, here's what the rules are, by going through the test code. And it should be readable enough, and that should be a goal, to make those readable enough that a business person who knows the rules could understand what it's doing. Once you put stuff in comments in the same code, let alone described in some other place like Confluence, now you're like, I don't know if this is up to date anymore. So that's what I think. Mike, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say I agree. And one thing is also you could, if your team isn't familiar with specification by example, um, that is a great technique where it's actually the title of the book as well.
Yeah.
But it's where you specify business rules through examples, and the idea is that you do these examples together with your whether it's called the product owner or subject matter expert, whatever you know internal lingo you have for someone who fulfills that role, that that the developers that are working on that particular area of business functionality work together with the
Yes.
product owner to write those examples.
Right.
Like when this is the input, we expect this, when we, and enough to fully qualify all the business rules. Even if you don't, certainly writing tests for it is great. But yeah, highly recommend even just the having those conversations
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
insanely valuable. And until you
Yeah.
do it, you don't really get it. But then once you start doing it, there's so many aha moments where
Mhm.
I, as a developer, misunderstood what the goal is of the product owner,
Mhm.
and those disconnects are what cause production bugs,
Right.
that escape.
Right.
So having those conversations super valuable.
Yeah, definitely during the definition of those, yeah, you want you want everyone in the room, who has knowledge and or some kind of involvement in the creation of whatever you're creating, and definitely define those as examples. And sometimes they can get complicated enough that you might need like a spreadsheet, um, and that's fine. Um, what you can then sometimes even do is, and there are tools that they sort of went out of favor, like Fitness and Fit, where you would use the spreadsheet to actually, or a spreadsheet like thing, uh, to actually define tests that actually get executed against code. But still think there are places where that would be useful if you have sort of very complex calculations. Not talking like, high-end mathematical, integration of simultaneous equations or something like that. But basically, where there's enough calculations where expressing it in something other than formulas might be awkward. And what's nice about that is uh, this, you can have it so the spreadsheet calculates it, and everybody says the spreadsheet is correct. So that becomes your golden oracle. That becomes your master, and then you can integrate that with test runners to basically say, well, okay, now operate that spreadsheet on the actual code. But that's probably that went out of favor because again, it's like this extra step that you have to do to integrate it. And could you not just express that directly as, for example, JUnit tests? So it depends on the domain you're working in. But if you have a lot of those, like you've got, a spreadsheet full of them, then that might be worth it.
And also related to the writing of the tests, um, even if you're not doing domain-driven design, using the specification by example approach, make sure you use the language of the domain experts, not what we as programmers might think of as implementation details. So
Yeah,
if you write them in that language, one, it's good practice for DDD,
right.
but it also makes the test readable by the product owner if it uses their language. So
Hmm.
then they can look at the test and go, yeah, that's right. That's what I'm expecting.
Yep.
Right. So that's another goal you might have.
Yeah, I think even if like, what does it mean to do DDD is a I think an interesting question, perhaps a philosophical one, but certainly the consistent language has to be there, right? And that's why having the tests be expressive enough, and a good test for the test, whether they're expressive enough, is can the domain experts read it? If
Yeah.
they can't, or they're confused, um, you might want to look at what are they confused by? Is it just the code that's getting in the way, or is it the terms that are being used? And then that gives you the signal that maybe you're not using the correct terms. So
My
great
new phrase for the
question.
day is do DDD.
Do DDD.
So
Hey there,
I brought this
ex-proof.
up.
Yep.
Oh, you want to get a
I
question? You
just want
can.
to get these
Yeah, please.
questions, and then we
Yeah,
can
sure.
dive into it. Should DTOs be validated before comparing to internal objects? Yes. So uh, you asked basically where does API validation logic go, and um, I don't know if I have an article on that yet. But basically, there's two levels of validation. There's the API level validation, which is I expect this thing to be a number. Is it a number? I expect this thing to be a string, perhaps an email. Okay, does it have an at sign in there and a dot to the right of the at sign? And that's all I'm going to check. I'm not going to do anything more than that, right? Just to see is it what it is it non-empty, right? And then looking for just basics of like, is this string non-empty? Are there, trimming off blanks and things like that? So basically non-domain validation, there's a certain level you can do. Like this is supposed to be a phone number. Depending on how you input it, hopefully you strip away all the punctuation and so on. And maybe you just see is it enough digits. I'm not sure I'd go so far as like make sure it matches a country code that I might leave for the other for the next layer. Um, so basically, it's like the things you can detect at this level that are not having to do with the domain, um, basically domain rules, like the domain rules that we talked about. So then you've got your validation, just do these inputs correct, and then you basically convert them to value objects often, which are then guaranteed to be, well, this is at least a number that looks like it's supposed to be an identifier. This is supposed to be an email address. And then the domain can do further validation. And so that's a great question since we're doing validation right here in our song importer. And there's multiple layers of validation. In fact, Mike, can you bring up the song importer controller where we actually get the input? Right. So the first thing we do there in line 29 is the thing null? So we can detect that here. We could also detect if it's completely blank and just respond immediately anyway. But we defer that then to import songs. And what we get back from import songs is lower level validation of like now it's doing the parsing and things like that. And where you do parsing is also interesting. Like, is that domain parsing or is that just converting something? So for example, I have my Kid Money Manager application that takes strings from a text message. And I do parsing at that level because that's not domain information. The domain doesn't care how somebody said, I want to spend $20. What it cares about is that there's a transaction that needs to happen that is withdraw $20 from the account. So the parsing in that case is actually outside of the domain, and that validation happens there. So sometimes it's a little ambiguous about where the validation falls. So I always think about is this something that a business domain expert would talk about, or is it just how we're handling input and converting it into the domain? And so yeah, so if you're using some basic Spring, if you're using the Spring validation, which is basically the bean validation that comes from Hibernate, uh, uh, the annotations of like must be a future date. You can annotate that. Must be not blank. Must be maybe a minimum size in terms of length. Like for names, if you're asking for a full name, because you should never ask only for a first and last name. Uh, you should ask for a full name. Probably
I
needs to be at least one character, but not much more than that.
having an interesting conversation about names. Speaking of names,
Hmm.
um, at a place that I volunteer, and it has to do with um, last name versus first name. And so these are for,
Hmm.
um, you know, you know, hi. I'm trying to think of a two name person that's famous. I am so bad at this. Hi, I'm Michael Jackson. I listen to this radio station, right?
Right.
Um, that little spot might be filed in our system as Jackson, comma Michael,
Right.
right? Which in some ways makes sense. But what if you don't know which is their last name and their first name?
Right.
And so this is common, or this is a challenge in the US where like Chinese, Japanese, other languages sometimes have it in a different order than we do.
Right.
And what's really frustrating is, well, not frustrating, but makes it challenging is some will switch it for the
Right.
US market,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so
Ugh.
it's already reversed. So how do you
Right.
know which ones, unless you
Right.
know literally the name of that person for real?
Right.
Um, yeah, just write name.
Just
That way you can
yeah. Yeah.
respect what they've specified.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's so funny. It's like I remember, like, and used to have a collection of physical artifacts for music, like records or CDs. It's like, how do you alphabetize your collection so you could find things? And it's like, well, is this the name of the band that happens to have the person's name in it? Like the Pat Metheny group? Like, do I file that under P or under M? But it's not just Pat Metheny. It's him as part of the group, and so his name is part of the group, and it's like, okay, I know the whole name, and so I'm just gonna do the full name, and it's like, that's fine.
so what about a Pat Metheny solo album? Was that under Pat as well?
Right, well, yes, because I gotta be consistent. So
Yeah,
right near Pat Benatar, yeah.
right. There you go.
So just use full name and let the computer do searching. Uh, Expert says, "I need to check if an end date is after start date, is that domain validation?" Um, Again, that's kind of tricky because what does after mean? Is it 1 second after, 1 day after, is 1 hour after okay, same date? If you're not taking time, then clearly then it's just date. And yes, I might do that validation because it's clear, like, this is the start date, this is the end date, and they must be after. Sometimes it's on or after, uh, but that's fine. And I would make sure to test that. But yeah, I think that's fine to basically, what I like to do is can I figure it out at this level, right? So the controller sends in some stuff. I've already parsed them as dates. So first I check, are they dates? Are they valid dates? If you're planning a trip, are they future dates? Uh, how far in the future? Because maybe there are business restrictions, like you must do this 7 days in advance. That I would defer to the domain. But if you're just saying, are these inputs relative to one another valid, then I would do that. And again, it's like, can I do that sooner? Because then I can give more quick feedback. In a sense, I always think about, like, the domain is like this, like, this worker who doesn't want to be bothered unless everything is in proper order. And so it's like, I don't want to bother that worker with data that's not valid, because that just annoys the worker, and slows down your system. And it might hit the database, which might actually slow down your system. So I like to avoid that. All right, some great questions to start off with.
Yeah.
So speaking of validation, let's go and see what happens now when we put in bad data. We want two things to happen. We want the two things to happen. I think they're working now. Is data that doesn't have enough columns or has the wrong columns, or actually we don't even have a header, which we'll need. So we expect it to basically give us some failure messages, but that the input that we have doesn't go away. So click the button.
Click the button.
Voila. So it skipped the first row because we now assume, although we don't validate, and maybe that's the next thing we need to do, or we'll see. We'll
I
look at
think
our
it's,
list. Yeah,
yeah.
but it might be the next thing to do is, like, what are the columns? But we got the failure message and our input stayed, so all is well.
Yeah. And that was the goal, is for the input to be
That
valid.
was the
Not
that
cancel
was
that.
that was the goal. Yes.
And what's interesting is we probably should show what it was, just this that we had wrong, right?
Yeah. So there were three possible values, and we only tried two of them.
We were so close.
We were so close. It's kind of funny, but when I realized what happened, I'm like, oh, we were so close, but we were looking at another area because text area is different. So unlike a lot of the other uh, places where we replace text through the time leaf attribute, um, normally we do a th text for non-inputs, like, hey, replace the contents of this h1, right, with this value, or we do that with the messages, replace each of these p's content, right, we have a th text there, replace the failure message with the actual message. Text areas turn out to be the same kind of thing because the content goes in between the open and close tag, unlike every other input type. So every other input type has a value attribute, and that's where the actual content that's input goes. And so text area, that's why I was really confused, because text area is different from every other one.
Every other one? Oh, every other one except for paragraph.
Every other input type. So text
Yes.
area, I mean, it's also its own
Oh, that's a good
its
point.
own element. So maybe I shouldn't be surprised that it's different from all the other input types.
Yeah. Input type.
But
That's a good
yeah,
point. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
Let's
hey,
get that.
Astrid, and yeah, in Indonesia. I mean, there's certainly countries where single names, and I mean, we could talk more about names, but we've got stuff to do.
And we don't really. It's not like we have names for that. Oh, we do. Artists.
So let's see what's
Look at
left. What's
Jira.
next in our Jira? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, we got to check something off now.
Oh
That's
yeah, we got to
Jira
check the 58.
58. Yeah. We need like an air horn every time we get that.
Woohoo! Celebrate.
Woohoo. So we were, according to our little what's next in the queue,
Right.
only parse the columns we want. Must have at least 8 columns. Other columns are ignored. Failing tests. Decide whether to use tested parse or parse song level.
Right.
That's where we left off.
So I think we should, in a sense, do a little bit of outside in, even though it's two methods on the same class. Thinking about it sort of outside in, I think what we should require is that somewhere in the header are those 8 columns. We don't
Right.
want to. We shouldn't care about order. Right? Even though artist will likely be first and song title will likely be second, we shouldn't care about that. But somewhere in the number of columns that we get from the header, there should be those 8 columns.
Right.
So we
And when
can
you
do
say,
that at the parse level, and then we can worry about parsing an individual song, and we realize we'll have to pass in that header. But in a sense, we can maybe create some kind of object that represents the mapping of columns to those things, something like that.
and just for folks who, so in the TSV song parser class, there's a parse method which gets all the songs that are coming from the bulk import.
Right.
And then it calls for each song
Right.
this method down below called parse songs.
Right. And that's
Parse
the one that actually,
song singular.
right. That's the one that actually parses the individual columns using the split for the tab, which is, these are all tab separated. But right now, as you can see in 61 and on, all those columns are hard coded.
Yeah.
And that's really, we knew that was not gonna work for too long when we wrote it, but we had to start somewhere.
Yep.
And so Xproof, yes, you what happens with validation, this is always an interesting thing. Like, I mean, I have an entire hour plus long presentation on validation. Is you are going to have multiple places. You're going to validate the same thing, perhaps in multiple places. So you're certainly going to have multiple places for validation, but you're probably also going to have validating the same thing, because you don't want to necessarily trust the inputs. But this is where converting to domain value objects can help, because then you don't have to validate it again. So if the outer layer converts the dates to an actual date, but of a date of a specific kind, right? So not just that it's a date, but it's, for example, start date, and that start date must be in the future. Then you don't have to validate it anymore, because you know that start date is already in the future. That's already been validated by the value object itself. But there is going to be duplication.
And what you mean by that is not using a raw date
Yes,
class, but
correct.
build another class, maybe call it start date.
Exactly. Yes.
And that class does the validation, and once it's instantiated, it's copacetic.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you make
So
it immutable, so then it doesn't get
yes,
munged,
right.
and you can just rely on it safely in
Yeah,
the domain layout.
yeah. And that's something that's, I think, underused. That idea of, let me create a specific type for start date, and I will call it, like Mike said, I will call it start date, and let me create a specific type, new class, probably record if you're doing Java, called end date. Uh, and if you don't care, and you might even likely will create a pair of dates because they go together, and create actually that as a record, and so call it, you know, start and end date if you can't come up with a better name, but there's probably a domain term from your domain that would classify it and be a good name
Right.
for both of those.
It could be duration, it could be trip length, right? The
Yeah,
domain that
yeah,
defines it, but it
yeah,
could be many names.
yeah. So exactly, right? So you'd create your trip dates,
Right.
and you would not be able to instantiate it if the dates are invalid in any way on their own or in relation to one another. Yeah. Date range is a little generic. I'd want something from the domain. Like, what do these dates mean? So trip date, plane, some, usually trip, but maybe it's booking date or something like that.
I guess I guess it would depend if there was duplication, but if you had the need for two different date ranges that had the exact same validation, you could have an abstract class date range where the two, like,
Right.
future travel dates
Right.
versus past travel dates. I don't know why you would have it, but again, the domain would drive the need. And then if you had that need, then an implementation detail name like date range could come into play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but that one's, yeah, I agree. I think wouldn't start with date range. I would use that as a potential abstraction.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And people might say, well, isn't that wasteful? You just created new types. Like, types are cheap. They don't cost you anything. Uh, all they do is contribute to better understanding of the code. It's like, wait, which date range was this? Is this this for the car or for the flight or for the hotel? Um, and those are different. So, all right.
Even if they're exactly the same,
Even if they have the
their
exact same
validation is
information, they are different. Yeah.
conceptually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we
So
were
let's.
talking about starting out outside in at parse.
Hmm.
Is that what you were
Hmm.
riffing on?
Exactly. So
So
let's go to our parser test.
it's plural.
Parser tests. I was thinking the name of the class.
Control.
Um,
No. Yeah, control F12.
so we want to. I think we want to add a new test.
Go to the bottom, or do you think there's a?
I don't know. Since we're doing the header, it feels like it should go at the top.
I like that.
And we might, if there are enough of them, we might nest them. But for now, we'll leave it. So what do we want our first test to be?
So I guess we could start with something that's where we pass in just header rows and nothing else. Would that be helpful? I'm trying to think the smallest step that would
Hmm.
move us forward a little bit. What would we look for?
So would we even bother looking at the header rows if there's no actual data? Would we just say there's no data here?
Yeah, maybe that's a first step.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah. Just make sure there's at least 2 rows. Do we even do that?
I don't think so. Well, we know we didn't because when we ran the runtime and I put in 2 rows without an error, it just said,
Right. But that wasn't. So there's two issues. One is the first row the header row?
right.
The other is there any data after the header row? Are we
Maybe those
check?
are 2 tests at first.
Yeah.
Is there a
So
header row?
right. So what I was asking is, do we have a test that says there must be 2 rows?
Oh, I don't
at a
think so.
minimum.
Let's go look. Uh,
I don't think so either, because all of our tests are doing create with header.
yeah.
That's a 2-song. That actually technically is wrong.
This one?
Yeah, because that test is not putting a header on, even though the songs are invalid.
Oh,
There's no header.
right. And what you're referring to is last,
Yes,
I was gonna say last week, but 2 days ago,
right.
we created this factory method to stuff a header before each test. So this is actually a test that's we somehow missed this one too. Well, let's read the
Yeah, I think we sort of assumed that since these were invalid, we didn't need the header row, but now we're about to write a test that requires it, that requires a header row.
so preparatory refactoring to change these to have. No, but then they'll
Well, they're going to fail
fail.
anyway, because
Right,
there wouldn't be a situation where we'd pass in, let's say that one, right, without
right,
the 2-column headers, right? Because presumably we're simulating that you're copying and pasting from a spreadsheet with the header row. So it'll have a header row. It'll just have 2 columns in the header row. I mean, there's another validation we could do, which is, does the number of columns in the header match the number of columns in the second row?
right.
Do we want to bother with that? So yeah, maybe let's make a little list, because it's now exceeded my working
Yeah,
memory size.
exactly. Columns in header match number of columns for song data.
Yeah,
And
and
what
so
was the other one we're looking at? We were also
the other one was that there is at least one song in addition to the header row. Basically, at least one line. And then it's, does the header row have the 8 columns that we're looking for? Or 8 required columns?
yeah, it's a better way of putting it. The 8 required.
Because we're requiring them.
Right. Now, what's interesting is we do have a different concept of required data. And I don't know where we probably documented that in our, man, it's been a long time. Ubiquitous language. Let me drag that in and see what we wrote about that. Could have sworn we had the concept of required. Actors. Not, I haven't done mirror in a while. I'm like, how do you move stuff around?
I don't know that we documented much about required here.
Maybe we didn't.
So I think in our
Does
test,
Control F work in this world? Let's see.
I guess.
Nope, we didn't use the word
Yeah.
required. Okay, well, let's move that out of the way. Go back and look at, do we put anything in here? No, that's it.
Yeah. So what's interesting is we require 8 columns. We don't necessarily require content for all
There it
songs
is.
in all columns. Yeah.
Wow, that's like obscure. Like
Yeah.
the little asterisk means
Yes.
required.
Yes. So
Let's
maybe
fix that.
let's fix that. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So that's right. So release title and release type are optional as well.
Right.
You might so theme is required, but themes is not required. So like maybe an
Right.
annotation after line 160 because that's where you have themes.
Oh, there is themes. Okay.
Yeah, for some
At
reason we
least
put it
one.
first. At least one. Yeah. So our requirements for the data are going to be a little more interesting.
Yes. We'll have to
Um,
baby step this one.
yeah, yeah, oh, for sure. So, but I think we can. I think we have enough to go on for now, though. So let's go back to our little test
Test.
list.
Let me get back up to the Jira location. Good thing I saved some of those conversational notes that we were
Yeah,
having. Okay, let's go back to parser test.
yeah. So I think if we wanted, we could put 4 as being required, something like required song data or data song has required fields. Has yeah, something like that. I don't know.
Field I like better than data.
Yeah, you can
So
say
these
C.
are actually all separate tests.
Yes, yes, yeah,
Let's pull that out there.
yeah. So which one should we do first? Because they're not
Hmm,
necessarily in an order.
no.
I'm thinking 2 is the simplest.
Yeah, I was thinking, what's the simplest?
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't think we need to say bulk import here. I think because we know what we're
oh,
testing it against. I think we just
right.
need to say um, I think we could just say m- must have 2 or more rows, and then we can sort of ratchet up the um,
The criteria.
yeah, ratchet up the assertions.
And so then we just, well, technically it'll be multiple tests. One will build on the other, so we won't necessarily build 4 tests.
Yeah, I don't know.
We
I
won't
don't know
know
what.
till we get
Yeah,
there.
we won't know until we get there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So when we're doing this at the parse songs layer,
Uh,
or no, the parse layer.
parse layer. Yeah, it
So
is a little confusing that we've got a
let's,
parse method,
I think,
which is parse multiple, is basically parse all the data. Uh, but
should we
yeah,
rename parse?
I I wonder if we should.
We've got parse song, and parse songs is awfully subtle difference.
Yeah,
Plural is valuable. I don't know what you think about that one. Going back to the production code here, we've got parse, and then down the bottom, parse song.
we could call it parse all.
I could work with that.
So let's try that on for size.
Okay. Oh, it actually kind of reads nicely. Parse all songs
Hmm.
from the calling perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Let's look at it from a test usage. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. All right, ship it. All right,
Well,
so then we can go back to our tests that we were writing. Um, yeah, that's good.
and you were talking about, I'm wondering if we should separate into subclasses, areas where we're testing parse all versus parse song. Not subclasses. What do you call it?
Nested. Yeah, no, I actually
Nested
knew what you
classes.
went. And I
You
knew
know what
what
I
you meant.
meant? Yeah, I
Yeah,
just used the wrong word.
yeah, yeah.
Um, or is that a premature optimization at this point?
Um, I think our
Oh,
test names might have to shift a bit. Uh,
there's
'Cause
actually
actually
only one.
that one we thought actually we would have to add the header row, but actually no, that's parse single song. So maybe
Right.
um, that might be the only. Is that the only one where we're calling parse song directly?
Let me check. I like this pinging back and forth. Yeah, only one.
Yeah. It might be worth it to segregate that one.
You want to segregate it as a separate class,
Yeah.
are you thinking, or a
No,
nested file?
I think put it basically like put it at the bottom and put it in
Yeah.
a nested to like really segregate it. Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. You can just say at nested.
Really?
Well, not only, but that's required. That's it. It's just an annotation.
Oh, okay.
But I was suggesting writing it first because I thought IntelliJ would autocomplete that for us, but maybe not.
Let me try it. No, I'm not seeing anything.
That's a bummer. Oh, I know why. Because I actually have a live template that does that.
Ah,
That's why I was thinking that. I don't think that's a built-in one though. You could try it. You could just say nested and see what happens,
oh, just
just on its own.
look.
Yeah, lowercase. Yeah, no, yeah.
No.
It's a custom one. Oh well. All right. So yeah, so just go ahead and nested doesn't take any parameters. So you don't need the parens. And we can call this parse single song or something. Sing song. And then you can paste it. Yeah.
Make sure my
One
cut
thing you
is
can do
okay.
is then we can rename the test since we sort of have the prefix of parse single
Oh,
song, and then we can basically say just returns failure result, and so take out the duplicate part.
yeah, it makes it more shorter.
Yeah. So then when we run it,
Mhm.
it'll read more nicely.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's rerun everything.
Yeah.
I feel like it's been a while. All good. Back to our
So
test.
back to our thing. Yes. I was going to say don't. I'm not even sure numbering it is useful.
I know, it's like,
But yeah. We think that's the order, but the order
yeah.
of operation may change.
Yep.
So we're doing real TDD according to Kent Beck, right? Because Kent Beck reaffirmed
Oh,
that you need a test list. So we now have a written test list, and now we're doing real canonical TDD.
it's official.
So let's do the simplest thing that could work.
I'm looking at a test we could steal from possibly.
I'm wondering. It's pretty much that test, except testing that just that there's one song.
So
instead of the actual song, we would just say has size. Yeah.
but wait a second, this is gonna
So
pass. We
yeah.
want it
So
to fail because we want to
did,
make
right.
behavior.
So we didn't kind of say is this our failure path. So I think we have to maybe change our test name to make that a little more
Oh, wait a
clear.
second. No, it will pass because we gave.
It
Are
will
we ignoring?
pass because
Will it?
we're right now we're just skipping past the first row.
We're totally skipping. Okay,
We're just
I just want to
totally
validate that and run it.
yeah,
Um,
because we got that skip one in our
right.
lines.
Okay, so yeah, that's not so helpful from a negative test perspective.
Yeah, so I think we, in a sense, have covered the positive aspect of that, at least for having the row with the test on 32. So I think we can make this a failure one, which is, since we said must have two or more rows, I think we can rephrase that as throws exception if does not, I don't know. does not have 2 or more rows. If fewer than 2 rows.
Less than, fewer.
It's countable, so it's fewer.
Oh, that's an interesting distinction. Let me think about that. Countable. I don't grok it. Can you explain?
So my playground has less sand than yours does. We're not counting the grains of sand. But my playground has fewer swings than yours does. Because I have 3 and I have 2 and you have 3. So if you can count them, so I have less money than somebody else because we're not counting dollars, but I have fewer dollars than somebody else because dollars is something we'd count.
Got it. It's almost like you should be writing technical documentation, Ted.
It's almost like I care about that. Oh my God, I got into what felt like a little bit of an argument, and I hope my friend wasn't upset about the HTMX documentation about not calling certain things out. I sometimes feel like I have almost too much empathy for the reader, and it causes some problems. But yeah, so countable is even though a lot of folks just use less and they don't use fewer, that's like. But if you want to know why their difference is basically is it countable or not. All right.
Sorry, I'm just making little notes in my notebook.
So here we want to throw an exception. So here we just want to create the songs having
without the header.
We could try without the header, yeah.
I forget. How did we structure that? Oh, just a straight string. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just delete the.
Yep. Hey, Sweetie.
Welcome, Sweetie. Woohoo. So now we need to rewrite the assert.
Right. So since we're returning a result, this would be a failure result. So we can start off with just being is success is false. Because I don't think we have an is failure method. Yeah, we just have success.
Yeah.
Oh. Don't want to do it now, but we need to
make a note in Jira.
I'll make a note because we're going to do it soon. I saw failure message singular pop up and we need to get rid of that. Okay. And we can delete 27, 28 because we're not going to get that far.
Right. Now, if we're throwing an exception, how are we asserting?
Well, we're not, right? Because we're returning a result, so we don't throw exceptions.
Right.
We will eventually test the failure message saying not enough rows.
Oh, so is our test method already?
Yes. So I realized when I was thinking throws exception, but then we're not actually throwing exception. We're just so parse all returns failure. Yeah.
Is that good enough, or do you think returns failure is?
Yeah, I think fails is like what does fails mean? Whereas return failure, we are literally returning a failure result.
It's more precise.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Convinced. Sold to the highest bidder.
So what do we think is going to happen? We'd have to look at the code to figure it out. Because I don't know what parse all does is if it because it skips the first one, it ends up with
row.
empty. Let's look at the code. So so it skips. It doesn't map and a collect. Technically, we have no failures because there's no individual songs that fail. So we're gonna have a success that's empty. That's gonna be interesting. That's my guess is the test is gonna fail because it actually is gonna be considered successful. Um,
So should we add another assert to see about your suspicion about how it'll behave?
sure. Yeah, we can say assert that uh, the result songs is empty. It won't get that far, so we probably want to do that first if we want to assert my. You have individual song. It should be songs.
Ah, right. And we're checking that first.
Well, if we check is
Oh,
success
because
false,
yes,
that's
yes,
going to fail right there.
yeah. And this way we want to determine whether the suspicion that that'll be empty
Yes, yeah.
is true. Got it.
That's that's my that's my
Let her rip.
hypothesis. Yeah.
Let her rip. Hypothesis. Yep.
Yep.
Oh,
So
interesting.
songs was empty, and songs should never be empty if it's successful. Um, so this is good.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a hypothesis assertion, but we actually don't want to assert that, so we can take it out. But now
Right.
we've confirmed both that the test fails as expected and that it succeeded or did what it was what we predicted it to do. So
Will we need a test that says, hey, if no, because we're going to take care of this. Never mind. I was going to say something along the lines as, what if we have dealing with this scenario as it currently is passing,
mhm.
or sorry, no, it failed.
Yeah.
But we'd expect it. Yeah, yeah. Never mind.
Yeah, I thought you were
I'm
gonna
good.
say like, do we want to always make sure songs or always make sure songs is never empty or something like that, but
Right.
I'm not sure. Maybe put that at the top of the list and see so that we don't forget about it
Yeah,
or somewhere
that's
in the list. When success is true. Because by definition, success means we've parsed at least one song successfully.
right. Okay, so now we need to change parse all.
Yes, we need to change parse all. So what's the simplest thing we could do?
Just make sure there's at least 2 rows.
Yeah.
Can we do that within this one stream, or would we have a guard clause ahead of it?
Uh,
Because if we do the stream, it'll consume the stream, right? So
oh, that's a good point. Well, we can regenerate the stream because it's just a method on. I mean, it's slightly inefficient. So we could do that. We could create a guard clause out of tsv song.lines. What we could also do is after we do the collect, we check to see that that's kind of ugly. That the partitions is success. Yeah, I don't like that as much because we now have to. So right now we have a method map to songs from partition. So we'd have to pull out the partition. We'd have to get from the partition for true and see that that list is empty. That feels less obvious and less. I
would
mean, we could
be
do it, but
it would be confusing, I think, from a readability standpoint.
yeah, I think it's going to be better to do the guard clause, even though it
There's a
reparses
slight
TS.
inefficiency. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could always save off. We could always convert it to a list, and then turn it back into a stream for the partitioning.
Hmm.
Yeah, Astrid, that's what I was saying. It's like we could check basically 26.5. Like maybe it was 27.5 when you said it. We could check to see that's empty here. That's then a nested check. That feels even worse. I really feel like it must have two lines is sort of has very much the feel of a guard clause. Like we should be checking that up front. So I think, unless you feel differently, Mike, I think that's
No, I'm totally down with the
yeah,
guard clause.
yeah. So let's do it.
Actually, you were saying we should save something off first, so we should do an extract.
Well, we can do that for refactoring. Let's do the easiest, cheapest way to do it.
Which
So we can just say
is
tsv songs dot lines. If it's less than or equal to 1, then we return a failure result. And we'll leave the message empty for now. We'll ratchet up our test to include that. I think we need to say dot size or dot length. I don't know if it's dot size or dot length. Oh, maybe it's dot count because it's a stream. Yeah. It's like, wait, is it size, length? No, it's count. Because I forgot lines returns a stream. So yeah.
Is it value? Is it text?
Yeah,
Is it?
Yeah. So I think that will make the test pass. And it does. So let's ratchet up our expectations.
Interesting.
What?
I've always been doing Control Shift F12 to close windows. So I'm going to rerun the test.
Okay.
And I normally do Control Shift F12 to close the test window.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't do Control that time, and I just did Shift F12, and it still closed it. Let's see what the difference is.
Because
restore
current layout, which is not a straightforward thing, and it may not always do what you want it to do.
Right. I have to go look that one up. Restore current layout.
There's also what is it? There's also Shift Escape on Shift Escape, which hides the active tool window. So if you run it and then you do Shift Escape.
Oh, right. That used to be my normal way of closing.
Right.
But it doesn't work when you also have.
Yes, if you have two open, that it's only going to close the one that basically had the focus.
Right. So if I do Shift Escape now, just close project. What if I do it again? It'll do.
It will. Yeah. Because the other tool window then becomes sort of the active window.
Got it. Yeah, I used to use that, but then I switched to Control Shift F12 because it's always does the right thing.
Yeah, so now we have because arrays have dot length. So we got dot size as a method, dot length as a method, dot length as a property of arrays, and now we have count for streams. Awesome. So let's define the failure message we want, and then assert on that.
Actually, I just write it from scratch. Insert.
Yeah, I was as you were like messing around, it's like, oh yeah, and we wanted to write a nicer result assertion, which maybe we'll do.
Do we want failure message in this scenario?
Well, yeah. So this is what I wrote a note about. Is we want to get rid of the ones that return individual messages, because we always want to be returning. That was basically just a parallel change, and we actually don't want to return multiple, right? Because we're just doing get first, which is ridiculous. Because what if there's two? Let's actually fix that now. Since we have failing tests, let's fix that now.
Yeah. Well, let me actually go back to the test and so that we compile
Yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, now back to result. So we want
So
to see
let's,
who's using this.
yeah.
Only one test.
So let's, what's the production code that's using it? I thought I saw another usage of it.
Oh, there is. Parser's using it. Map to failure messages from.
Mm, that's not that method. I think IntelliJ is confused because that's the static constructor, right? If you hit Control B on that, where does it take you? I
There.
don't.
You don't think it really does?
Uh,
Constructor of what, though?
oh, I see what it's doing. Okay, no, that's true. All right. So what it's doing is it's gathering up all the failure messages. Um,
But the get first is confusing.
but it shouldn't be doing that. I mean, it could do that, and that would be okay. So what this is the part where we've generated results for each individual parse song, and then we're basically collecting all of the individual, which we're so parse song is an individual method, right? Is parsing an individual song returns a result that may have a single failure message. Um, it's certainly possible though that it could have multiple failure messages, although we haven't done that, in which case this map to failure messages from would be broken. I think what we actually want to do is do a flat map of failure messages on 39.
Now, do we want to
So
just
this should be a refactor.
okay?
So all of our tests that are currently passing should continue to pass.
Gonna rerun the test before we do make the
Yeah.
change. Actually, probably should commit
Um,
or no.
yeah, yeah, we can commit. Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
I think we can just change it and see if it passes, and then
Flat.
so flat map, yeah, that one. And then failure messages. And I guess that has to be a stream, so it's failure messages dot stream. I think you can't do it if it's a the method. You have to convert it first to a method call.
Oh, so do
Replace reference with lambda. Yeah, and then you can say failure messages dot stream. Yep. So what that does is it basically instead of trying to put the list of failure messages and then you get like a list of lists, it basically flattens it out. And so it will basically gather up. Since there's only one in this case, it should work.
Is there any refactoring back to no?
I mean, you could extract it to a method reference, but there's not much else you can do.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll leave it.
I think it's okay.
Run
Flat
it.
map is always a little weird. Yeah, run it. We hope we haven't broken anything.
We're good.
All right.
We are.
So, hey, Alwali. So Alwali asks about the use of Boolean here on line 37 at the bottom. The only reason we're doing that is because we're pulling things from a map, and maps do not store primitives yet. Someday soon, hopefully, but right now they don't. And so we have to use. So when we did a partition, it partitioned it into two parts: one for Boolean true, one for Boolean false. Boolean false is all the failures. And so the only time I actually use Boolean as the wrapper object is when you have to put it in collections that are not primitive collections. So here it's a key in a map, and so must use Boolean. Um, if you're getting a null pointer exception due to the use of Boolean, you need to to figure out how that null got in there. Um, but generally, so for regular fields, no, I don't use Boolean, the wrapper object. I use primitives. Um, so that's that. Yes, the inlay hints. This is like for streams is the only time I actually want the inlay hints. Otherwise, I really don't want them. So yeah. And Mike, so I'm not sure if you noticed what was happening with the inlay hints while we were trying to figure out the flat map. Is it was doing a stream of R, which told us that it did not know what the type of the thing we were streaming. But
Mm,
now it's correct.
got it.
So now I think we can get rid of failure message by inlining it, because the only place we used it now is in a test, and we can just actually just change the test, maybe not even inline. So how is that used? Um, so I think we can say failure messages contains exactly. And that should still pass.
Let's see.
That does. And
Yeah.
now we can get rid of it. Yep.
Actually,
And it's highlighted as not used. For once, IntelliJ does the right thing.
take a
We
quick break.
yeah, let's take a quick break, and then we'll do the same thing for song. Yep.
Sounds good.
All right.
5's probably good enough for me.
All righty. So I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get rid of and clean up the song. See you there.
Can you hear me? Hmm.
Whoops, sorry. I was muted. My bad. Something's going on with mic setup.
Now I can hear you.
No, I was muted. That was my problem.
Oh, okay. I rebooted my headset.
Yep.
Uh,
No, that was a me problem, not a you problem.
cool. Cool.
So I was saying, now that we've done failure message singular, we can do song singular and get rid of that.
Sorry, get my head back into it. Get rid of
So let's find usages of song and see
song. Oh,
who's
right, right,
using
right.
that.
Same idea.
Huh. All right. So same thing. We can do a flat map. So let's convert it to a method and then do a flat map.
That one's the right one, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Then flat map,
Flap a map.
flap a map.
So you want to do tab, not enter.
Let me do it again.
That's the difference. And it
That's the
took a long
keyword.
time for me to get used to that.
So do tab here
Uh-huh.
rather than enter.
Yes.
And then it takes care of the wrapping.
Right.
Okay. And
And we
then
want now songs plural because we want the one that returns a list. And then we can do
then
stream. Yeah.
tree.
Yep.
I did tab that time. Yeah, it's going to be
Yeah.
an interesting habit to work on.
Yeah. In fact, I wonder if I sort of default to tab these days. But anyway. And we shouldn't have broken any tests.
Yeah.
I say shouldn't, doesn't mean didn't. Excellent. And now we should be able to get rid of song.
Interestingly enough, song is still showing usage.
Yeah, that's why I don't trust that indicator. Because if you do a control V,
Oh,
it'll basically report no usages found. So there's some indexing
it's still not making it.
process that is inconsistent, and so I never trust whether it's gray or not. The safe delete I do trust because it will basically internally run the find usages. So,
Okay.
all right,
Cool.
now let's do a commit.
Sweet.
Now I can cross that off my list.
What do I want to say?
So I haven't watched it yet. I assume you're referring to Trisha's presentation. I have her session queued up because it was done in sort of aimed towards European time. Like I wasn't going to get up at 3 a.m. and watch it live, but luckily it is recorded. So I'm going to go and see if there's anything that I don't know. I will be surprised, happily surprised, but surprised if she mentions anything that I don't already know. European time is the best time. Yeah, I know. It's really interesting. I don't understand what is wrong with the United States. Specifically software developers who are doing Java in the United States. Where are they? And why aren't they watching? All right, did we figure out what we did?
Yeah, I was just kind of poking around.
Okay.
This is the main thing we did.
Yeah, we kind of did two things. So I wonder if you want to segregate the commits, you can uncheck that and check result in song service. so result, we dropped song and failure message. Oh, maybe we can't segregate it, so never mind, because they're sort of intertwined.
Right.
So let's just let's just check them all. So we can just say removed the singular song and a failure message from result. And then yeah, added a test.
Interesting.
Did we do the rename of parse to parse all in this
We
commit?
did. Yes, we did.
Okay. Yep.
What do you want to say about this? We're beginning down the path of
Yeah, I would just say added tests to start requiring a header row.
we can get rid of the class name, the method, the test name, I think.
Yeah. Looks
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, ship it.
That's interesting, Jonas. I mean, I guess I follow like Dan Vega and Deshaun Carter. Trying to think of what other Java streamers you follow. I do follow a bunch of the Java folks like Nikolai. I guess Billy Coronado. He doesn't stream a lot. He creates videos. He doesn't generally stream a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's like all the people you mentioned, other than me, are Spring developer advocates, which is interesting. Because like I consider myself a yes, a Java streamer, but focused on, I guess, crafter type of way of, you know, clean code and TDD and refactoring and things like that. And there aren't very many folks who focus on that in the Java world. There are in the C# world, but not as many. Not any, as far as I can tell, in the Java world, at least as streamers. All right. So what's next? So we require 2 rows. We wanted to nail down the failure message, which is how we were going to ratchet up this test. And we took a tangent, remove the individual message so we wouldn't get confused. So now we can assert that result failure messages contains exactly our message. Yeah.
And
now we get to decide what it says.
Yeah.
So what should it say?
Now you're better at crafting English.
Well, so it's
me,
interesting because yes, technically that's what we're asking for, but from sort of a domain perspective, why are we requiring 2 rows?
Right.
In a sense, right now, that's actually all we can say, because we haven't validated
that it's a header row yet.
We don't have a situation where we have a header row and basically have 2 rows, and the first one must be a header row, and we can't establish that here. So I think that's all we can say here. And it's really interesting because I was tempted to say, oh, let's say you must have the header row in addition to your song data, except that's not what this failure is saying.
Testing, right? Yeah.
This failure is saying exactly what you wrote. It's like you must have 2 rows. We don't know what they are. We're not going to validate them just yet.
We haven't gotten to these yet.
Exactly.
right?
So
So
this is all we can say.
which means we can
Hence,
get rid of the first comment.
yep.
And then
Um,
we run it, this should fail.
yes, because it won't be
We
empty.
hope. It
Well,
should
it'll
be
be
empty string.
it should be empty string, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and it is.
Now we make it pass. One more. And no. Whoa,
Whoops.
where was that? I'm gonna bring the test back up. There it is.
There it is.
Actually, I'm curious why Control W didn't work. Let me try it again. Oh, it did work. I just didn't.
Yeah, you hit Control A. That's what happened.
Oh, but I mean, A is nowhere near. Well, I guess it is kind of near W.
It's close enough.
It's kitty corner. Yep. Okay, so now it should pass.
It's close enough that I would do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Now we refactor.
Yes.
I'd extract that to a method, the if, or the
Yeah,
original.
and this is sort of the downside of not throwing exceptions, because normally a
You
lot of
do
my
the whole thing.
yeah, you basically just extract the whole thing and say require, and it would throw an exception if not. But here now you can get into some. This is where you can start heading down the more functional route, uh, where you you actually have a stream where you basically say on failure and on success, and so you basically string the entire thing we're doing in this method. And this is what Scott Washland, I think that's, I forget how you pronounce his name, so I probably butchered it. Talks about in his book around functional is railway oriented programming. And so you basically have just this stream of function calls in a stream like, or actually using streams. We're using a stream like structure, and you don't have any ifs, and all you do is you end up getting a result out of the entire sequence of calls. I don't think we're quite there yet in the way our result uh, is set up to do that, but it's something that I'd like to play around with. And so you basically replace the ifs, because what we're expecting here is a result failure, but there's no reason, in a sense, we couldn't carry this result failure through the entire method and then just return the result. And so it's result failure, but we don't even look at the
And,
result. We basically call, like
and just return the
require,
result.
and it
Yeah.
returns a result. And then we do the next thing, and we say on success, do this stuff, on failure, do this other thing. And we just keep doing that until we're done with all our processing. And
Then
instead of
return
having
result.
instead of having like two ifs, we'd end up with just a sequence. And so that's my sub goal, or a goal for playing around with this. But we're not
Yeah.
there yet, so we'll just do what we can. Yes, is a boolean.
Are you kidding me?
Well, it doesn't know any better.
I know. But you don't like to use require for
Yeah, because it's because
is
it has to be readable.
right.
So if I mean, we could just say if, too
Zeros
few lines.
if too few lines. Oh, it reads nice.
Yeah. Yeah, so it is similar to that kind of chaining. Yeah, maybe has too few lines is nicer. I always go back and forth about that because There's a
What about?
what's the term? Yeah, I don't like having negations in the thing
Right.
because that makes it harder to read.
Yeah. So what do you think? Has or without the has? If has too few lines versus if too few lines. I could go either way. I'm not. What are you thinking?
If too few lines. I kind of like that better. By itself, the method name might be unclear, but since it's returning a Boolean, I think, and I think it reads slightly better. So, at least to me. So, yeah. So let's keep it at that.
Okay.
So yeah. So Suiji, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his last name, but I threw the info in the chat. So Scott Lashin. I'm gonna have to watch the video again and see how he pronounces his name because I never get it right.
Blashin?
I don't know. I'm not gonna try. And it's really interesting because I'm very intrigued by F sharp. I wish there was a similar language that was Java compatible that wasn't Scala. Because F sharp is very much a much more functional language than certainly than C sharp, and it has some really. I've read some code in it, and it's quite readable, and it's very strongly typed. So I'm intrigued by it. I just wish it didn't require a completely different ecosystem. But anyway, so this book that he wrote called Domain Modeling Made Functional, somewhere in it he mentions, I think in that book, he's also got a blog somewhere. He mentions this railway oriented. Maybe not in that book. I'll have to find it. So he has a website called F Sharp for Fun and Profit. Maybe he only did it in a talk. So this is the link to his talk, to his blog post about his talk on railway oriented programming. So so the slide basically looks. Where is it? Oh, it doesn't have the individual slide. I'll pull it. I'll pull it up. Where is it? So recommend definitely watching it. I have to rewatch it. I haven't watched it in a while. And yeah, just getting the specific slide up. So this is this idea of railway oriented programming. So you sort of each step through calling the function, you're either sort of on the valid track, the green part, right? So you validate first, and if it's no good, right, like there's not enough rows, then you're on the red track, and you pretty much just, even though you're still calling update DB and you're calling send email or whatever you're doing, you're basically ignoring it because all your results are failure. And but if you're on the green track, then you get a successful outcome at the end. And so it's basically an alternative, and it builds on this result-like thing that we've been building, what's called an either, and you build on that to get this kind of way of doing things. He does caution though that sometimes you want to do exceptions, and so he's pretty specific about that. So highly recommend that presentation. All right. But we're not there, and that's fine. So
there was
we
one
did a
more
refactoring.
recommendation.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's one more recommendation in the chat from Astrid.
Oh,
about
yeah.
naming, which I thought was
Hmm.
interesting, was calling it, what was it? It
It
has?
has. Uh-huh.
I've never done the it before. It has.
Yeah, so I've seen that used, and so like Kotlin uses an implied it when it does a lot of the streaming like things or functional like things, lambda basically lambda like things. It sort of names the parameter for you as it,
Mm.
which is nice because then you could say it dot has too few lines or something like that. So that's an alternative. Yeah.
I guess the advantage of that is then this, if you just saw it by itself, you're like too few lines.
Right.
Maybe take a
Right.
little bit to grok it. How
Well,
far
so
are
the
we
other
to
thing
that?
we could do is put a suffix called in.
Ah, right.
Then it's
Uh,
if too few lines in TSV songs, and then that reads perhaps even more nicely.
right.
That gets to some of the what I call sort of sugary type of things. It's like it doesn't add any meaning, but it makes it read better.
Right.
Should we leave it like that?
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Next,
Next test.
one of these. Which one of these would be a good next one?
I think we have to do the one on 14 before we can do the one on 13.
Yeah. New test.
Right.
Sorry. When fewer. Uh,
Are we saying when missing required columns in header?
that's better. I was trying to figure out how to not do not.
Yeah,
But missing required header columns.
sure.
Let me get rid of the word in. It's already a pretty long name. Parse
Yeah,
all returns failure
that's
when
not
missing required header columns.
that's not that long.
Well, but we could have done this, right? It
I'm
was,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
joking
Uh,
because I've written way longer ones.
yeah. Okay. Can we steal from down here a bit?
Well, so let's talk about what
Be assertive.
is what are we going to assert? Um, because here that like there's multiple ways this could fail.
Right.
We could have all the columns except for one. Um, we could have none of the right columns, uh, right? Because we didn't include the header row at all. So maybe we want to start with basically we forgot the header row, and so there are no, uh, and we might even want to parameterize this. But I think we should start with the header row should um, so I think basically I think I'm getting at I think it's harder to write the failure one because there's so many different ways it could fail
Mm-hmm.
versus that it actually has a correct header row.
Should we disable this test and then write a new one that's about the positive? Something like this.
Yeah, and I think in this one, um, I'm not sure if this is what Astrid meant by in the wrong order, but one of the capabilities that we're wanting to implement is that the header row has everything we need, but the columns are in the wrong order, or quote wrong order, in the non in a different order than we've been assuming up until now.
So is that what you were thinking? A different test that's a positive flow. It may not live long.
I think so. Well, I don't know for sure. So let's go down this way and see where we end up.
Okay.
And if we end up wrong, we're committed, right? We've done a commit recently.
Yeah. Let me just double check. Yep.
Let's commit that refactoring, so just the CSV song parser, not the test class.
Right. Does that only impact that one? Let me just double check.
Yeah, because it was a refactoring. It shouldn't have changed any tests.
Right. Because it was internal.
Yeah.
Added guard method.
Sure. All right. So yeah. So let's go down this road and see where we end up.
Well, we need to set up a bit. Would we just
I'd probably copy that, but I'd inline it because we want to actually see the header.
right?
Um,
So copy up to
yeah,
about here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do that. I think we want to. We're going to end up having to do that pretty quickly. So,
That meaning, was it something Sweetie
yeah, it was
said?
something Suiji said. Yeah. So basically, something in that just does the. But I'm not sure where that header parsing will go,
Right.
which is what we'll figure out. Um,
Well, clearly this, but that will just succeed.
So I
Because
want,
that
yeah,
much.
I want our test to fail, right? To force us to actually do some header parsing.
Right.
So what I was going to suggest is we move um, we drop the columns that aren't required, and then change the order.
Okay. So we had release title was not required. Now also the tab. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes,
Or
yeah,
just being at, okay.
yeah.
So
And we don't want release type. I don't think the release type is required either.
no
And
notes if
not
you need it.
notes. Yeah. And we don't need contributor. Careful about your N there. You still need the N.
Yeah.
No, you lost the N.
Oh,
Yeah.
we still need the end. That's
Yeah.
sorry, I got it backwards.
I mean, this will fail too. But I think we want to really push on the fact that order doesn't matter.
I mean, Will this fail if we're going to test what? Success?
Yeah.
Because right now, are we even looking at the header row or just skipping it?
We've just been saying there must be at least 2 rows and that we skip the first row. So we
Right.
haven't seen the first row as a header.
Right.
And so we need to update.
What's the assert we're going to do then?
Well, we're not finished with our setup because our song data needs to match the columns.
Oh, got it. Nope, that didn't work.
I wonder if you can you try hitting Alt Enter? And can we say inject language? Last choice. Yeah.
Just do it.
Just hit enter, yeah. And can you try typing T? It doesn't have tab separated. That's a bummer. What I was hoping is that we can inject tab separated values as the language, and then we could edit it as a fragment. But it doesn't have that. I mean, there may be a way to do that, but I don't think we're set up for that. So let's just do it manually. And let's drop, I guess let's keep theme 4 for now.
Leave it or keep it? I mean,
let's keep it. Let's keep
it.
So now what we want to say is this should be fine, right? It has the right? It has the 3, 1, 2, right? Because we were maybe bring up our requirements from Jira. Yeah. So artist, song title, and theme is the only thing that's required. So the statement in our actual Jira story is actually wrong.
Right.
Because we said requires 8 columns, but actually we don't require 8 columns. So maybe we need to change that.
Right. We
only require really 3 columns as a minimum.
3 to 7.
No, well, 6.
Right. Yep. 6 off by 1. I'm a software engineer.
Yes.
That's my fence post. Okay.
So where we said must have at least these 8 columns is actually must have at least the well 3.
3.
And maybe we want to pull the requirements here.
Pull? You mean move them up?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what this bottom stuff is. I'll go look at it later.
Yeah.
I'm just going to copy it rather than.
You can probably delete the to do because we've already decided that.
Right.
All right. So what we should probably do is add on 65 and a half. What are the minimum 3 columns we need? Well, you already said must have these 3 columns, and so I'm basically riffing off of that. So
I see.
So it's artist, song title, theme 1. And then maybe indent that line, and then on the next line say we support these 8 columns. And then other columns are ignored.
6, right? Or
well, no, so 3 is the minimum, right? That's required. And then if you have any of these, we'll use them and we'll ignore others.
Right. 1, 2, 3. And then do that.
Right. But I put the where you say on 65 other columns are ignored, that actually belongs on 67 because we're saying we
Yep,
support these 8 columns and any other columns will be ignored.
that's true.
And 69 is now wrong. You can just delete it. Yeah, that's better. All right, so let's go back to our test now with our new knowledge. What we want to say is this should pass. So our desired behavior, right? What should it do is this should pass. It has, in fact, we might want to just have theme 1, maybe since that's what we just wrote, that the required columns is only 3, then let's get rid of the other themes. Yeah. So we stated that that was our minimal required columns, and that should be success. And this is probably going to propagate a whole bunch of changes that we will certainly not get to today.
No.
Does that look right? So we've got artist, song title, theme. Artist, song title, theme. That should be success because we're saying that that's our required column. So it's going to fail because we are expecting much more than that.
Let's see what it says.
Yep.
Now, do we want to ask it through a deepening assert? Like, why did you fail? Or, have it look at the message?
Well, we're expecting it not to fail, so there's nothing more we can do here, other than
Oh,
put another
right.
assert, but it's not going to get to any other asserts that we write. So I
I
think
guess,
Nat, yeah, go ahead.
couldn't we write this? Yeah. Bah. What is it contained? And see what it said.
Well, the proper thing that would be a valid assertion would be is empty, because if we're expecting success, we expect then the failure messages to be empty.
Right.
It would still allow us to see the error messages though. So if that's what you're trying to do, then
That's what I was trying to do. Just wanted to
yeah,
see the error message.
yeah. So we can say is empty, and it will say, oh, it's not empty. And that we were not doing a weird contains exactly.
Yeah.
So our our ancient assert around must have X number of columns is now wrong.
Where is it?
What are you looking for?
Oh, the ancient assert.
Sorry, when I said assert, I meant guard clause. So
Okay.
in our code, we have hard coded minimum columns is 9, right there on the line above that you scrolled away from.
Yeah.
On 16, yeah. So that is no longer true.
Right.
So we're going to have to relax that expectation.
Right.
We can change it to 3 and see what fails.
See where else it fails.
So hopefully we have some place where it's passing in and expecting failure for having too few columns. So let's run our tests and see what.
I don't see a test for that.
Well, there wouldn't be a test directly against
Oh, right.
that
Yeah.
that constant.
Oh
So we've got a
yeah.
bunch of failures where um, yeah. So in fact, our parse single song test is the most interesting failure. Uh, and so this is the difference, by the way, between the red exclamation points and the amber or orange or whatever you want to call it X's. Um, the exclamation points means an exception was thrown, uh, which is fine, but is not a bad assertion. What we want to find is the bad assertion, and this is the bad assertion. Um, so uh, the error message is what's wrong here, because
Right.
it said we were expecting it to say 9 and it's saying 3. We can look at the other ones, but they're all about basically the guard clause failing.
These guys, when you say others, I mean the exclamation
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Right ones, you're right.
So that one's out of bounds. What's the one above it? Handles rows with not enough columns. Yeah. Yes, they're all probably going to be the out of bounds. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So we're coming up against time.
I know. It's a bummer.
So I think this is probably where we'd stop,
Yeah.
because now we've got a failing test. Uh, and the next steps we'll have to figure out, like, how do we want to approach fixing this? Because relaxing the constraint uh, causes a bunch of tests to fail. So do we do a parallel change, or do we see if there's maybe another way we can do this? Um, do we disable the current test and say, let's test directly against parse song? Because that's really where the meat of what we're going to do has to happen.
Right.
Um, but it's still a bit unclear what the parameters to parse song are going to be, because it needs some kind of header information, whether it's the actual header row itself, um, or a pre-parsed sort of mapper. That's an unknown,
Right.
and we'll have to figure that out.
So I guess if we do directly test against parsing, we'll be able to try those tied in rather than trying to do it from parse all. Well, actually, parse all would
Well,
be hard
I,
to
I
do it.
I think we still need to do something with parse all, because I'm not sure whether parse song parse the header,
Oh,
or
who's going to
does
get that responsibility?
right.
Right.
Um, and I think uh, I think parse all will have to parse the header. It doesn't have to, but my theory is we parse all parses the header, creates some kind of mapper, and then hands that into parse song.
So perhaps something around here, instead of skip, we
Yeah, we
parse
would we
one
would basically consume we take the TSV song's lines, we'd consume the first value as the header row, go
header
parse it, and then do the rest with the parse song.
with the remainder.
Yeah, but that's gonna be a little tricky
Yeah.
because we're gonna we'll take it step by step and see how it goes.
Yeah. Next time we meet.
Yep. All right, folks, that's all for today. Thanks so much for joining us. Uh, in terms of next streams, uh, I might be streaming this afternoon, so look out for that. If not, possibly this weekend there might be some streaming. So, as always, you will find information about upcoming streams on the Discord. If you haven't already join the Discord, where we'll talk about upcoming streams, as well as all other stuff that you can ask questions about and find out resources. And we've got a book club. As I say, it's never too late to join the book club, so check it out. We're reading The Programmer's Brain. And that's it. So we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for watching.